Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
Cody asked me to speak on money this weekend, and I was just like, all right, but you got politics. So, we're going to be looking at this aspect of kingdom living that is really how to be kingdom people as it relates to our treasure. Maybe 6 or 8 weeks back, we had a weekend where we talked about stewardship in general, like our time, our talent, and our treasure, and how those things, if they're placed in the hands of God, our life can make a profound impact in our families and our neighborhoods and in the lives of people that are around us. And so today we're actually going to take that treasure piece and expand on it a little further. I will just say this as it relates to treasure, that one of the most beautiful scriptures and the orienting thought for us of why do we take time and talk about things like this is that Jesus so specifically says, and we'll look at this through the morning, that wherever our treasure is, our heart will be there also. And so the purpose for taking time to talk about money, specifically in the context of church, is that culturally we are people who are fed messages after messages after message about money. The average American is marketed to over 3,000 times a day. And most of the messages of the marketing that we receive look something like this. If you drink this beer, women will like you more. Right? If you drive this car, you will be a happier person. If you just get a bigger house, then you will be living some sort of a dream that we're all to aspire to. But Jesus actually says some very different things about what it means to be human and what resources are for and what they're not for. When I was a child, I actually believed that treasure would play a lot bigger role in my life than it has turned out to play as an adult. Anyone? I grew up as a child on Saturday mornings watching a TV show about Scrooge McDuck. Anyone know where I'm going with this? The guy was finding treasure everywhere, and he was swimming in it in a money bin, right? I also heard stories as a child about Blackbeard the pirate who had caves full of treasure, right? I watched a show. Some of you who grew up during this era will probably love this reference. Anyone seen Goonies? Yeah. One-Eyed Willie's Treasure. Like if you were a kid and you were growing up in the Pacific Northwest, going on an adventure to find rich stuff was apparently a big focal point of life. The Monty Python guys went through a lot to try and find a Holy Grail once. And even in the classic literature that I read as I got a little bit older, there were stories like The Count of Monte Cristo, where a guy's life wasn't working out so good. He goes to prison, meets an old man, finds out where there's a buried treasure, escapes, and then not only does he get treasure, but he also gets sweet, cold revenge and to smooch a girl, right? Like, the stories of my childhood that I grew up hearing and listening to made me think that hidden treasure was going to be a pretty important part of life. There were even these other family, like our family did a movie night once a week. Anyone have a rhythm like that? I'm one of 3 boys, and we would get to choose a movie for family movie night, and almost every time when it was my dad's turn to choose, we would watch one of the Indiana Jones movies, right? And there's this scene that's just seared into my memory where he's got like the bag of dirt and he's doing the swap, but he doesn't get it quite right, and a boulder almost crushes him. And it was at this moment in my childhood that I was like, one thing I know to be true: treasure can be very, very dangerous. There was this other moment in my childhood that I remember where, how many of you guys know what Awana is? We have an Awana program. Some of our children are being raised in Awana. It's a place to hide God's words in our hearts as children, and it's a really powerful thing. when I was a young kid, I was in an Awana program at the church that my parents were raising me in, and I was memorizing these scriptures. And if you'd win at game time, or if you'd memorize scriptures, or if you do these certain projects or whatever, you'd get these like Awana dollars that you got to take to the Awana store and buy stuff. Well, my MO was that I would save as many as I could possibly save and just buy the place out of candy. And then, being one of three boys, I knew that there's no way that you could like amass this treasure trove of candy and just have it out and about, because my brothers would eat it when I wasn't looking. So there was a special place in one of my clothing drawers where the candy got hidden under laundry, right? Kind of a thing. There was one day in Awana where the leader, the Awana director, had a bunch of these Awana dollars in his front pocket, and he had a pen in there too. And he went to grab his pen so that he could write himself a note. And as he pulls this pen out of his front pocket, it's just like poof. It was like snowing Awana bucks. And all of us kids are sort of circled around the outside of the game circle, watching them just gently float to the ground, until one enterprising young man, who shall remain nameless, decided, this is our moment, let's get those bucks. So 80 kids are flooding in and grabbing all the Awana dollars. And then we all, of course, since we didn't earn them, we all had to give them back, and we got a stern talking to about integrity. And it was at that moment I realized, sometimes if we get treasure in the wrong way, it's not a good thing. There was this other moment in my childhood. Any of you guys ever shop at Sam's Club? Do you know what this place is? I mean, you buy 1,000 of something you only need 3 of, right? And so my mom, having 3 boys in our household, we were a Sam's Club family because we had to buy food in bulk. And every day my younger brother and I would go to Sam's Club with my mom, and hanging above the entrance or the exit of Sam's Club was a giant trampoline. Anyone ever see this? This trampoline became the object of desire for my brother and I. We had to have a giant trampoline in the backyard. And my mom, I think thinking that it would deter us, said, well, if you save up your money, you can get it. She was just thinking, I'm not paying for all the broken arms and concussions and that kind of thing. And she thought, there's no way they're ever going to do it. My brother and I put our heads together and we start calculating, here's how much money we're going to get for our birthday. And if we pool it together, and if we mow 30-something lawns this summer, and if we do all of our chores and we don't spend anything, by October, we will have the giant trampoline. And our plan comes together beautifully, and we pool our money, and we show it to our mother, who then has no choice but to let us buy the giant trampoline that hangs above the exit. And we put it in our backyard. And it was at this moment that I began to realize that actually sometimes hard work and being careful with the resources you do have can equal you getting to do a thing. I had this other moment when I was in high school. I had been working this job at a restaurant. Anyone ever work at a restaurant? I'm just curious. I was terrible at this job. My short-term memory is awful, and I couldn't get orders right, so they moved me to busboy. They were like, well, maybe you can just clean, right? Kind of a thing. So I become a busboy at a restaurant. I save all the money that it's possible to save. I just put it in my savings account, and I don't really know what it's going to be for, but it's going to be for something. And when I do find the something it's going to be for, I'm going to have the money there. Well, I have this other friend, and he's the kind of guy that spent every dollar he ever got. Anyone have one of those friends? So I'm like the saver, and he's like the spender. Well, he starts to date a girl in high school, and he realizes Christmas is coming up, and he's got no money. And if he doesn't get her a Christmas present, it's going to be like a bad boyfriend move, right? And so he begins to work a seasonal job at Metro North Mall. Well, here's the problem. The Last Samurai had just come out in the theater, and I really had to go see it. And so I talked to my buddy, and I go, just blow off your work shift. Let's go see this movie. It looks amazing. It's going to be incredible. And he's like, dude, I got it. I mean, I need like $150 more in order to get this present. I can't blow off shifts at work. And then a light bulb goes off in my head and I go, wait, we can solve this. Because what you need is money and what I have is money. And what I want is to go to Last Samurai. And if the only thing standing between us and Last Samurai is money, I will pay you $150 to go quit your job today. So he walks in, quits his job. He's got the money that he needs for the present, and I've got a companion for a movie that turned out to be pretty great, right? It was at this moment that I realized actually sometimes money and freedom are connected as well. There's a French philosopher that I read later in my 20s, a guy named Jacques Lacan. And he made this observation as it relates to the human heart and desire. And he said this: we all wrongly focus on the objects of our desire. Right? You find, anyone ever buy a car and you dream of the car and you dream of the car and you test drive the car and then you get the car and you're like, oh, this is so great. I'm driving like a really good car now. And then like a couple of months later, there's like fast food bags just sort of scattered around in it. And you can't like go to the car wash enough to keep it shiny. And then all of a sudden the check engine light comes on way earlier. And you're like, oh no, this object of my desire has just turned into another responsibility. Anyone have these moments? There's the dream house, and you buy the dream house, and then all of a sudden it just becomes the place where your laundry is on the floor. Right? Lacan actually looked at this phenomenon and goes, what is it in us that idealizes stuff and dreams about stuff and attaches our hearts to the hopes of this stuff making us happy? And then we get the stuff and all of a sudden we realize it doesn't deliver what it promised it would deliver. And he started to look at this phenomenon and realize actually it would be better for us as people not to focus on the objects of our desire, but on the object cause of desire. What is causing the desire? Do we really want a shiny home, or do we want a place to raise our children and hang photos of the memories that we made? Do we really want a vehicle, or do we want the ability to go where we need to go? And once we start to realize the difference between objects of our desire and the thing that is causing that desire, we can become far more content with things that meet the real underlying need. See, as the years have passed, I've come to find that treasure isn't always about pirate ships, and it's not always found in caves. It's become increasingly evident to me over the years of my life of faith as I've watched people who have amassed a lot of treasure, and as I've actually in my life had more resources than I even dreamed I would have in life, that actually the purpose of money, the underlying purpose of money, the underlying purpose of treasure is incredibly important for us, because if we get this part of life wrong, it ends up impacting all kinds of things. See, Lacan was on to something, because our treasure and our worship are inextricably connected. They can't be separated. See, worship is, the object of our worship is this: whatever I give my heart over to in the hopes that it will return life to me. If I give my heart over to the Lord in hopes that He will return life and life to the full, He delivers on His promise. But there are so many things that we can give our hearts over to that don't actually fulfill their promise. And for those of us living in the Western world who are marketed to consistently, the words of Jesus as it relates to this human searching are incredibly important for us if we want to live life and life to the full. Jesus actually says these words in the Gospel of John chapter 10, that there is a thief, there is an enemy, and he's come to steal and kill and destroy. And the things that we're offered by the enemy of our hearts, by the evil one, They will actually, maybe for a moment, satisfy some need, but not in any real or lasting way. And the things that we give our heart over to can actually end up trapping our hearts in places we never wanted to go. Jesus says, the thief has come to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that they may have life and that they may have it to the full. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus is talking to his disciples. And he says these words. These will frame some of our conversation around what money's real purpose is in our life. Luke 12:22 says this. Then Jesus said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body and what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens, they do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than the birds. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about rest? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They don't labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and is tomorrow thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Like the byproduct of a life of following Jesus is that your needs will be met. Your heavenly Father does see and does care, but it can't be out of order. Verse 32, he says, do not be afraid, little flock, for your heavenly Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. So sell your possessions, give to the poor, provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What Jesus does in the lives of his disciples is he actually sets right this order of things. Seek God, everything else will fall neatly into place. Try and be in control and try and take care of all your needs on your own and sprinkle in a little bit of God on the side, and you will live as a nervous wreck. Make sense? Here's the tricky thing. Where our treasure is, that's where our heart goes also. Like, we can't take our stuff that we amass in life with us when we die. But the state of our hearts as we live life has a great deal to do with what happens after we draw our last breath. There's a man that comes to Jesus and he wants to know about this kingdom that Jesus is telling people to live in. One where they're not ruled by anxiety and fear, taking care of themselves, but where they trust in God, their heavenly Father, to provide for their needs. And he's heard perhaps some of these sorts of teachings of Jesus, and he comes to him in Matthew 19 and asks this question. Just then a man came to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life?" "Why do you ask me about what's good?" Jesus replied, "There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments." "Which ones?" he inquired. And Jesus replied, "Well, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, love your neighbor as yourself." He starts going down. Is this list sounding familiar? It's the 10 Commandments about loving God rightly and loving others rightly. And the man replies, "All these I have kept. What do I still lack?" And then Jesus cuts to the heart of the matter in this guy's life. He says, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions, give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. And when the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had great wealth. Jesus sets this idea of treasure in a different way in his mind. Oh yeah, you can accumulate and you can accumulate and you can accumulate, but it's fruitless, it's meaningless. But set your mind on treasure that lasts. Set your mind on eternal things. And then you can follow me. And this little statement about the man's heart and how he leaves the interaction has these like 3 little moments in it that we see. And there's sort of like a warning for us. The first is that the man went away. The man doesn't say, okay, no problem. I'll sell it all. See you Tuesday. Right? The man leaves. He has to walk away from God's kingdom and a life with God. Yes, he's been living a tidy life. He's been obeying the 10 commandments for the most part, but like God doesn't have his heart. There's another kingdom that he loves way more than the thing that Jesus is offering. And so he leaves. It's like he just can't take the step to make a life with God, the thing that his life is about. But how does he leave? He leaves sad. Because the loves that he can't let go of, the loves that he can't tear himself away from, he has a deep sense of loss. Like those things can't fill him, but they've got their hooks in him. And the last thing we see is that the reason is that he had great wealth. His orientation toward what he had is this. Jesus says that the purpose of wealth is for giving. But his orientation of the heart was that my wealth is for keeping. So what is money for? Is the question that we're led to by teachings of Jesus like this. See, for people who are following Jesus, like what we do in relation to wealth has a lot to do with our destiny in life. And there are 3 lies, I would suggest. There's probably a million lies, but there are 3 primary lies that you'll come across as it relates to wealth, left, right, and center. There are 3 cultural lies about money. Here's the first one. The first lie goes something like this. When I have a little bit more, when I have enough, then I will be generous. Anyone ever have this thought? You're like, okay, the money's tight right now. But you know what? If I got a raise, then I would become a generous person. Do you want to know the truth about this lie? Whatever we do with the money that we currently have tells us what we would do if we had more. Does this make any sense? Like if we are generous with what we do have, and then we have more, we'll be generous with more. If we're stingy with what we have, and then we get more, it's not going to be enough. In Luke 16, Jesus says these words, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you've not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you haven't been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? Because no one can serve 2 masters. Either you hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other." You can't, it doesn't get more clear than this out of Jesus' teachings. You can't serve both God and money. And then listen to this response of the Pharisees that Jesus is talking to. "And the Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. And he said to them, 'You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your heart. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight.'" However our heart deals with whatever money we do have is how our heart will deal with more, should that day come. That's the truth. Here's the second lie around money that many of us encounter. It goes something like this. It's a quote from John D. Rockefeller, who's the first American billionaire. Maybe some of you have heard this. He was asked, how much is enough? Anybody know his response? Just a little bit more. This lie is pretty familiar to me. I'm guessing it's familiar to a lot of us in this room. How much is enough? Just like a little bit more is what enough would be. Here's the truth of the way that people actually behave psychologically as it relates to money. When people get raises, typically the first thing that they do is they increase their lifestyle. Have you watched this happen? How many of you make more money now than you made when you were very young? Yeah? Has your lifestyle adjusted to more? You have to be incredibly countercultural in the way that you interact with money to not do it. I got a raise, so now I don't have to drive this car that's limping along. Now I can buy a new car. I got a raise, and so now I don't have to live in this house where kids are sharing rooms. I can get a house with lots of rooms. Lifestyle usually adjusts to whatever level of resources. We'll talk about when that's not true in our next lie, but here's what the author of Ecclesiastes has to say about this phenomenon. He says this, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. Did anyone ever get more resources and realize you just had more stuff to keep track of? Life got less simple and peaceful. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune so that when they have children, there's nothing left for them to inherit. And then he says something kind of bleak, but honestly very true. Everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry with their hands. Here's the truth. If what we are giving our hearts over to is something earthly, then enough will never be enough. Which brings us to this last lie. And it's a lie that many of us in culture have embraced as a way of thinking about our resources. Here's the lie. I can pay for things that I want now, later. Anyone have this thought? There's a Saturday Night Live sketch with Steve Martin in it. I was thinking of showing it this morning, but he's essentially doing an infomercial where he holds up his financial wisdom book. And the title is, If You Don't Have Money, Don't Buy Stuff. He opens it up and there's nothing on the pages inside. And the people who are going through his program seem incredibly confused, and they keep asking him a variety of questions. But what if I want the stuff now and I'll have some money later? Should I buy this stuff now? No, don't buy this stuff. And they go back and forth with about 50 different versions. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at the average American, we like to buy more things than we have money to buy. And the sad thing about debt, I'm going to get you through half of a Dave Ramsey class. If you don't have money, don't buy stuff. Congratulations. You made it through the first 6 weeks of Financial Peace University. Proverbs 22:7 says it like this. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. Debt is a trap, especially consumer debt. So what is the roadmap? If these lies are not actually good for our heart, if they wrongly attach our heart and our view of stuff, what's the roadmap for a kingdom view of money? There's a book called God and Money that I would highly recommend to you. It actually looks at these 7 principles, and we've looked at them in weeks past, but we're going to return to them and read some scriptures about each of these 7 principles. And if we have this kingdom view of money, then all of a sudden the decisions that we make and the ways that we live as it relates to our stuff will become far more wise, and our hearts will become far more attached to the Lord and far less attached to our stuff. Here's the first principle. Everything we own actually belongs to the Lord. Everything. Here's a few verses. Psalm 24 says this: "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." Haggai 2 says this. This is the Lord speaking. "The silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord Almighty." Leviticus 25 says this: "God owns the land. The land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine." Psalm 50 says this: "God owns creation. Every animal of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills, and the creatures of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I wouldn't tell you, for the world is mine and everything that's in it." The foundational first step for us having a kingdom view of money is this: we are stewards of things that belong to God. It's all His. My kids fight sometimes over food. Anybody have little kids that fight over food? I've got 4 kids. They fight over food. I have found myself saying something that my parents once said to me when I was one of 3 boys, which is, "He took my food. It's all my food. I just let you have it." You don't have food. Dad has food. Congratulations, your dad is benevolent, right? This is the truth, though. We act like the stuff that we have is our stuff, but the truth is we're not here for that long, and we don't take any of it with us. We are stewards of something that belongs to God anyway. Everything is His. Here's the second principle. Our wealth and our possessions should be used for God's purposes. Since it's all His, what is it for? It's for His purposes. 1 Timothy 6 says this: "Set your hopes on God, who richly provides everything to enjoy." And in 1 Corinthians we see this: "It is required that stewards be found faithful." Since it's all God's, whatever we do have is supposed to be used for God's purposes. Here's the third principle. Wealth is like dynamite. It has the potential to do great good and great harm. Proverbs 30 says this: "2 things I ask of you, Lord, and do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Like, what need do I have for you, God? I've got everything covered. Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of the Lord." Wealth can do tremendous good, or it can do tremendously broken things. Which brings us to the fourth principle. Worldly wealth is fleeting, but heavenly treasure is eternal. What is the only thing that lasts beyond this life? People. Whatever we have will be gone. Many times within our own life we see it be gone. But for sure after our life, people last. Isaiah 55, we see this: "Why do you spend your money on that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy?" And in Matthew 6, we see Jesus say, "Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven." I would suggest this: other people coming into a life with God is the only eternal thing that we can do with money. Which brings us to the fifth thing. Giving generously to the poor is a moral duty in a fallen world. Wherever you lie politically, and I'll just leave this here for Cody next week. Gotcha. Listen to Matthew 25 when Jesus is talking to his disciples. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." And the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me." Doesn't that just have a weight to it? In the way that we see our stuff and the way that we see the people around us? Because it's easy for us to judge others who have need. Well, maybe if you'd have handled your finances a little bit better, you wouldn't find yourself in this pit. Like those thoughts that run through our heads. When we see people who have needs around us and we are generous toward them, we're not being generous just to those people. We're actually doing something that the Lord takes personally. Have you ever had someone be really, really nice to one of your kids, and then you just knew that they must be a pretty good kind of person? What happens to God's kids who have needs is something that he takes intensely personally. And this brings us to the sixth principle for kingdom view of our stuff. Giving should be voluntary and generous and needs-based. Luke 6:38 says this, "Give and it will be given to you, a good measure pressed down, shaken together and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." If we live more generously, and I'm not saying transact with God, but it is true. I've never talked to somebody who lived generously and so they just ran out. In God's kingdom economy, when we live generously, there's more. And the more generously that we live, the more God seems to provide. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give. Oh, I think I got him. Sorry. ADD. It's always something. Each of you should give what you have decided to give in your heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Here's the deal. It will never work for someone to stand in front of a community of Jesus following people and compel you to give. But when you realize that giving is a thing that's really ultimately between you and the Lord, and when you are generous and you experience the joy of doing things that are eternal with your resources, you just like a little taste of it and you just can't get enough of it. That's the truth of a generous life. Which brings us to the seventh thing. Giving generously breaks the power of money off of us. 1 Timothy says this, "Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction." Giving generously breaks the power of that kind of thing off of our life. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. If we believe that everything is God's, and that our wealth and possessions are for kingdom stuff, and that wealth has the potential to do really good or really bad things in the world, but that heavenly treasure is eternal, and that giving to the poor and being generous brings us joy in life and breaks the power of money off of us, we just might experience in the area of our finances, which is an important area of being human, we might just experience a little bit more, something like life and life to the full.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.